A violent commotion shattered the tranquility of the Mitchell homestead as three masked men burst through the door, guns drawn and faces twisted with malice. While Daphne, Deanna, and Daisy Warren huddled together in the far corner of the cabin, their eyes wide with terror at the intruders who had tracked them across 3 counties. "Well, well, look what we found," drawled the tallest outlaw, his voice rough as sandpaper as he sauntered forward, spurs jingling against the wooden floorboards. 3 pretty little birds all in one nest. Daphne, the eldest at 22, instinctively pushed her younger sisters behind her, chin raised defiantly despite her trembling hands. "Take what you want and leave. We have nothing of value here," the outlaw laughed, a sound devoid of humor that chilled the room. "Nothing of value. That ain't what your daddy told us before he died." He stepped closer, the amber glow of the oil lamp revealing a jagged scar running from his eye to the corner of his mouth. "Said his daughters had something real special hidden away, something worth killing for." Deanna, 19 and fiery, clutched her 16-year-old sister Daisy's hand while shooting a questioning glance at Daphne. They had arrived at their uncle's abandoned homestead just 3 days ago, fleeing the violence that had claimed their parents' lives back in Sweetwater. Their father's final words had been a desperate plea to run, to hide, to protect what he had entrusted to them. The outlaw's patience was wearing thin. "Search the place," he barked at his companions. "Tear it apart if you have to." As the men began ransacking the modest cabin, overturning furniture and ripping open mattresses, none of them noticed the lone figure watching from the tree line, a man whose steady gaze hadn't left the homestead since the Warren sisters had arrived. The same man who had trailed them silently from Sweetwater, keeping a protective distance. Hunter Hayes slid his Winchester rifle from its leather scabbard, his weathered face set in grim determination. 3 years of tracking outlaws for the U.S. Marshals had taught him patience, but seeing those men threaten 3 innocent women stirred something primal within him. Something that wouldn't wait for the law to catch up. Inside the cabin, the situation was deteriorating rapidly. The outlaws had found nothing of value and their frustration was turning dangerous. "Where is it?" demanded the scarred leader, grabbing Daphne by the arm and yanking her forward. "Your daddy's gold map. We know he gave it to you." Daphne's blue eyes widened. "I don't know what you're talking about," she insisted, though the slight tremor in her voice betrayed her. The man raised his hand to strike her, but the sharp crack of a rifle shot split the air. The window beside him exploded inward, glass shards flying everywhere as a bullet embedded itself in the wooden beam just inches from his head. "Next one goes between your eyes," called a calm, steady voice from outside. "Let the women go." The outlaws scrambled for cover, the leader dragging Daphne with him as a shield. "Who's out there?" he shouted, pressing his revolver against Daphne's temple. "Name's Hunter Hayes," came the reply, "and you boys picked the wrong homestead to raid." Deanna and Daisy exchanged hopeful glances. 1 man against 3 outlaws wasn't favorable odds, but it was the first glimmer of hope they'd had since the men had burst through their door. "We're taking these women with us," the outlaw leader called out. "You try to stop us, they die first." Hunter's voice remained steady. "Then we've got ourselves a problem, because those women aren't going anywhere with you." The standoff stretched into tense silence. Inside, Daphne could feel the outlaw's grip tightening painfully on her arm. She caught Deanna's eye, giving her the slightest nod, a signal they'd developed in childhood. In one fluid motion, Deanna kicked the oil lamp off the table. It shattered against the floor, flames instantly licking up the spilled kerosene. The momentary distraction was all Daphne needed to drive her elbow hard into her captor's ribs. He doubled over, loosening his grip just enough for her to break free. "Run," she screamed to her sisters, shoving them toward the back door. The chaos that followed was a blur of gunshots and shouting. The women burst from the rear of the cabin, racing toward the cover of trees with bullets kicking up dirt at their heels. Behind them, angry shouts and the crackling of flames filled the night air. They had nearly reached the tree line when Daisy stumbled, crying out as she fell. Daphne and Deanna turned back for her, but froze at the sight of an outlaw bearing down on them, his gun raised. The blast of a rifle cut through the night, and the outlaw crumpled to the ground. From the shadows emerged a tall figure, broad-shouldered and steady-handed, his face partly concealed by the brim of a worn leather hat. "This way," he said urgently, extending a hand to help Daisy to her feet. "My horse is tethered just beyond those rocks." The sisters hesitated only a moment before following him. The sound of pursuit grew closer. The other outlaws had escaped the burning cabin. Hunter led them to where his sturdy Palomino waited. "We can't all ride," Daphne protested, glancing back fearfully at the orange glow of the cabin fire illuminating the night sky. "We're not riding far," Hunter assured them, helping Daisy onto the horse before handing the reins to Deanna. "There's a cave system about half a mile west. We can hide there until it's safe." "Who are you?" Daphne demanded, even as she allowed him to guide them forward. "How do you know about us?" Hunter's expression revealed nothing. "Your father was a good man. I promised him I'd look after his daughters if anything happened to him." "You knew our father?" Deanna asked, skepticism clear in her voice. "Later," Hunter said, raising his rifle as shouts echoed through the trees behind them. "Right now, we need to move." The cave Hunter led them to was well hidden, its entrance concealed by a cascade of vines and underbrush. Inside, it opened into a surprisingly spacious chamber, the air cool and dry. "You've been here before," Daphne observed as Hunter expertly lit a small lantern he'd retrieved from his saddlebag. "I've been watching over you since Sweetwater," he admitted, setting the lantern on a natural stone shelf. The warm glow revealed a man in his late 20s, with keen hazel eyes and sun-bronzed skin. A thin scar traced his jawline, disappearing beneath several days' worth of stubble. "Watching us." Deanna's eyes narrowed. "For how long?" "Since the night your parents were killed." Hunter's voice softened. "Your father knew they were coming for him. He asked me to make sure you girls got away safely." "How did you know our father?" Daphne pressed, her arms crossed defensively. Hunter sighed, removing his hat and running a hand through his dark hair. "We served together in the war. Afterward, he saved my life during a bank robbery in Tucson. I owed him a debt I can never repay." He paused, his expression grim. "And now those same men who killed him are hunting you. Why?" asked Daisy, her young face pale in the lantern light. "What do they want from us?" Hunter and Daphne exchanged a look that didn't go unnoticed by Deanna. "You know," Deanna accused her older sister, "you know what they're after." Daphne hesitated, then reached beneath her collar to pull out a small leather pouch suspended on a cord around her neck. "Papa gave me this before he died, said to keep it hidden, that it was our future." With trembling fingers, she untied the pouch and tipped its contents into her palm, a folded piece of parchment and a small, oddly shaped gold nugget. Hunter drew in a sharp breath. "The map to Lost Canyon. You know about this?" Daphne asked, surprised. "Every fortune hunter west of the Mississippi knows the legend," Hunter replied. "A canyon filled with gold that can only be found with a specific map and marker." He nodded toward the nugget. "That's supposed to be the key that aligns with landmarks on the map." "That's what they killed our parents for, a legend?" Deanna's voice cracked with anger and grief. "Men have killed for less," Hunter said grimly. "And this is more than just a legend. Your father believed it was real, and so do the Blackwell Gang." "The men at the cabin?" Daisy asked. Hunter nodded. "Led by Silas Reed, meanest outlaw this side of the Rockies. They've been searching for that map for years." "What do we do now?" Daphne asked, carefully refolding the map. Hunter's expression turned resolute. "We get you somewhere safe, then I go after Reed and his gang. Alone." Deanna challenged. "Against 3 armed outlaws." "2 now," Hunter corrected, "and I've faced worse odds." Daphne studied him intently, noting the confidence in his stance and the weathered look of a man who'd seen his share of danger. "You're not just some friend of our father's, are you?" A hint of a smile crossed Hunter's face. "U.S. Marshal, or I was until 6 months ago." "What happened 6 months ago?" Daisy asked quietly. Something dark flashed in Hunter's eyes. "I crossed a line tracking the men who killed my partner, turned in my badge before they could take it." He shrugged as if it didn't matter. "Been living as a bounty hunter since then." Daphne exchanged glances with her sisters, a silent communication passing between them. "We're not hiding," she finally said. "These men killed our parents. They burned down our home. We're going after them." Hunter's eyebrows shot up. "That's not happening. Your father wanted you safe. Our father is dead," Deanna cut in, her voice hard. "And we're not children to be protected. We're coming with you." "Do you even know how to use a gun?" Hunter challenged. To his surprise, all three sisters nodded. "Papa taught us," Daphne explained. "Said in this country, a woman needs to know how to protect herself." Hunter looked like he wanted to argue further, but the determined set of Daphne's jaw gave him pause. There was something in her steady blue gaze that reminded him of her father, the same unwavering resolve he'd seen in Jacob Warren's eyes during the war. "We'll discuss this in the morning," he finally conceded. "For now, you should rest. I'll keep watch." As the sisters settled in for an uneasy night's sleep, Hunter positioned himself near the cave entrance, rifle across his lap. The embers of the distant cabin fire still glowed on the horizon, a stark reminder of how quickly safety could turn to danger in this harsh land. He found his gaze drifting repeatedly to Daphne, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest as she slept. Jacob had spoken often of his daughters, but his descriptions hadn't prepared Hunter for the reality of them, especially the eldest, with her quiet strength and penetrating gaze. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with the delicate features society prized, and everything to do with the determination etched into every line of her face. Hunter forced himself to look away. He had promised Jacob he would protect his daughters, not develop feelings for one of them. Besides, once they were safely delivered to their aunt in Colorado, his obligation would be fulfilled. He could return to his solitary existence, tracking bounties and trying to outrun his own demons. The night passed without incident, but dawn brought new complications. Hunter returned from scouting the area to find the sisters awake and in serious discussion. "They're still out there," he announced, ducking into the cave. "I spotted two of them searching the area around the burned cabin." "Only two?" Daphne asked. "Where's the third?" "Probably headed to the nearest town to gather reinforcements," Hunter replied grimly, "which means we need to move quickly." "Where are we going?" Deanna asked, helping Daisy fold the blanket they'd been using. Hunter hesitated. "There's a small ranch about 15 miles north. Man named Emmett Stone owes me a favor. He can give you shelter while I deal with Reed and his gang." "We already told you," Daphne began, but Hunter cut her off. "I know what you said, but this isn't up for debate. Those men won't hesitate to kill you for that map." "All the more reason we shouldn't split up," Deanna argued. "We're safer together." Hunter ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "You don't understand what kind of men we're dealing with." "We understand perfectly," Daphne said quietly, stepping closer to him. "They murdered our parents in cold blood. They would have done the same to us if you hadn't shown up, but hiding won't solve anything." "What's your plan then?" Hunter challenged. "Ride into town and call them out for a showdown." A steely determination entered Daphne's eyes. "No, we use the map." Hunter stared at her, momentarily speechless. "You want to lead them straight to the gold. We want to set a trap," Deanna clarified, moving to stand beside her sister. "Let them think they've found us. Let them follow us to the canyon." "And then what?" Hunter demanded. "You three take on armed outlaws in the middle of nowhere." "No," Daphne said calmly. "You do." Hunter blinked, suddenly understanding their strategy. "You want to use yourselves as bait." "We want justice," Daphne corrected. "For our parents, for ourselves." Hunter studied the three sisters, Daphne with her unwavering resolve, Deanna with her fiery defiance, and Daisy, young but no less determined. He saw in them a courage that reminded him why he'd become a lawman in the first place. "It's too dangerous," he said, but his tone had lost some of its certainty. "Life is dangerous," Daphne replied softly. "Our father taught us that. He also taught us that running from danger only means it catches you when you're too tired to fight." The silence that followed was broken only by the distant call of a hawk outside the cave. Finally, Hunter sighed heavily. If we do this, we do it my way," he stipulated. "You follow my lead, no arguments." Relief flooded Daphne's face. "Agreed. And if things go south, you run." Don't look back, don't try to help me, just get to safety. The sisters exchanged glances before nodding in agreement. Good, Hunter said, though he looked anything but pleased. Now let's see this map of yours. If we're going to Lost Canyon, we need to know what we're getting into. Daphne carefully unfolded the parchment, revealing a detailed drawing of a landscape with various markings and annotations in faded ink. The sisters gathered around as Hunter studied it intently. "This is genuine," he murmured, tracing a finger along a winding line that represented a river. "The cartography is accurate for the region northwest of here. I recognize these rock formations." He pointed to several triangular shapes on the map. "Can you tell where the canyon is?" Daisy asked, peering over his shoulder. Hunter shook his head. "Not exactly, that's where this comes in." He picked up the gold nugget, turning it in the light. "According to legend, when placed on the correct landmark, this will point the way to the canyon entrance." "How far is it?" Deanna asked practically. 3 days' ride, maybe 4, Hunter estimated, through rough country. "We should get moving then," Daphne said, already gathering her few belongings. "The longer we stay here, the more likely they'll find us." Hunter nodded reluctantly. "We'll need supplies. There's a trading post about half a day's ride from here." "It's risky, but we can't head into the wilderness unprepared." They emerged from the cave cautiously, Hunter leading the way with his rifle ready. His palomino nickered softly in greeting. "We'll need more horses," Deanna observed. "The trading post will have some," Hunter replied. "For now, we'll have to make do. Daisy can ride with me. You two will need to alternate walking." The sun was climbing high in the cloudless sky as they set out, keeping to the cover of trees and ravines where possible. Hunter remained vigilant, constantly scanning their surroundings for signs of pursuit. The sisters matched his pace without complaint, even as the rocky terrain and hot sun took their toll. By midday, they had covered several miles, putting distance between themselves and the burned homestead. Hunter called a brief halt beside a small stream, allowing them to rest and drink. "You're handling this well," he remarked to Daphne as she splashed water on her flushed face. She looked up, droplets clinging to her lashes. "Did you expect us to be helpless?" "No," Hunter admitted. "Not after meeting you, but this isn't an easy journey for anyone, let alone women," she supplied, a challenging edge to her voice. Hunter's mouth quirked slightly. "I was going to say people who have just lost everything they had." Daphne's expression softened. "I'm sorry, that was unfair." "No, it wasn't," Hunter said. "Most men would underestimate you. That's their mistake." Their eyes held for a moment longer than necessary before Hunter cleared his throat and looked away. "We should keep moving. I want to reach the trading post before nightfall." As they continued their journey, Deanna fell into step beside Hunter, while Daphne rode the horse with Daisy. "You were more than just friends with our father, weren't you?" Deanna asked bluntly. "The way you talk about him, it's like he was family to you." Hunter was silent for so long that Deanna thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "Your father saved my life more than once, but it was more than that. He saw something in me worth saving when I couldn't see it myself." "What do you mean?" Hunter's jaw tightened. "After the war, I was lost, angry, started drinking, getting into fights, ended up in jail in Tucson after nearly beating a man to death." He paused, the memory clearly painful. "Your father was the sheriff then. Instead of keeping me locked up, he gave me a job. Said if I was going to fight so hard, I might as well fight for something worthwhile." Deanna studied his profile. "That sounds like Papa." "He was a good man," Hunter said quietly. "The best I've known. When he moved your family to Sweetwater, he recommended me to the U.S. Marshals. Said I needed a bigger purpose." A shadow crossed his face. "I let him down in the end." "How?" Deanna asked. Hunter shook his head. "By not being there when he needed me, by not stopping the men who killed him." "You're here now," Deanna pointed out, "helping us." "Too little, too late," Hunter replied grimly. They continued in silence after that, each lost in their own thoughts as the miles stretched behind them. The landscape gradually changed, the flat plains giving way to rolling hills dotted with juniper and pinyon pine. By late afternoon, Hunter's prediction proved accurate as they crested a ridge and spotted a cluster of buildings nestled in the valley below. "Miller's trading post," Hunter announced. It's not much, but it's the only civilization for 50 miles in any direction. From their vantage point, they could see a main building with a broad porch, a stable, and several smaller outbuildings. A handful of horses were hitched outside and smoke curled from the chimney. "Is it safe?" Daphne asked, eyeing the unknown territory with caution. "Safer than staying in the open," Hunter replied, "but we'll need to be careful. News travels fast out here and Reed's gang might have spread word about you." "What's the plan?" Deanna asked practically. Hunter considered for a moment. "I'll go in first, get a feel for the place. You three wait here until I signal it's clear." "And if it's not clear," Daphne pressed, "then I'll create a distraction and you ride hard in the opposite direction," Hunter said grimly. "Head northeast toward the mountains. There's a line shack about 20 miles that way where you can take shelter." Daphne nodded, though her expression showed she wasn't entirely satisfied with this contingency plan. Hunter checked his weapons, the Winchester rifle, a Colt revolver at his hip, and a knife in his boot. "Give me half an hour. If I don't come back or signal by then, assume the worst." "Be careful," Daisy said softly, speaking up for the first time in hours. Something in the young girl's concerned expression seemed to touch Hunter. He gave her a reassuring smile. "Always am, little one." As he started down the slope toward the trading post, Daphne called after him. "Hunter," he turned back, eyebrows raised in question. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." Hunter tipped his hat to her, then continued on his way, a solitary figure moving steadily toward the distant buildings. The sisters watched until he disappeared from view, then settled in to wait, tension evident in their stiff postures and vigilant gazes. "You trust him?" Deanna asked Daphne in a low voice. Daphne considered the question seriously. "I think so. Papa wouldn't have sent him if he didn't. He blames himself for what happened to them," Daisy observed quietly. "I can see it in his eyes." "That makes two of us," Daphne murmured, her hand instinctively going to the pouch containing the map. Deanna placed a comforting hand on her sister's arm. "It wasn't your fault, Daph. You couldn't have known." "Papa entrusted me with this," Daphne replied, her voice tight with emotion. "He must have known how dangerous it was. If I had understood sooner, maybe I could have convinced them to leave, to hide." "Stop," Deanna said firmly. "You can't think that way. Papa made his choices. He protected this map for years, and he chose to pass it to you when the time came. He believed in you." Daphne drew a shaky breath, blinking back tears. "And now 3 more lives depend on my decisions." "Our decisions," Deanna corrected her. "We're in this together, all of us, including Hunter." They fell silent as they continued their vigil, watching the trading post for any sign of trouble. The minutes stretched interminably, the sun beginning its descent toward the western horizon. Finally, just as their patience was wearing thin, they spotted a figure emerging from the main building and heading back up the slope toward them. "It's Hunter," Daisy confirmed, her keen young eyes the first to recognize him. As he drew closer, they could see he was carrying a bundle of supplies. His expression was grim but determined. "What's wrong?" Daphne asked immediately, sensing his tension. "Reed's been through here," Hunter replied, tying the supplies to his saddle. 2 days ago, he's put out word about 3 sisters traveling with a gold map. There's a bounty on your heads, dead or alive." The sisters exchanged alarmed glances. "Did anyone recognize you?" Deanna asked. Hunter shook his head. "No, but we can't linger. I've got food, ammunition, and basic supplies, and some good news: I was able to purchase 2 more horses. They're not much to look at, but they'll get you where you need to go." "Where are they?" Daphne asked, looking past him toward the trading post. "The stable hand is bringing them up separately to avoid drawing attention." Hunter glanced back down the slope. "He should be here any minute." As if on cue, they spotted a young man leading 2 horses up the path, a bay mare and a dappled gray gelding. "That's our cue to move," Hunter said, mounting his palomino and extending a hand to help Daisy up behind him. "Once we have those horses, we're riding straight through the night. I want as much distance as possible between us and anyone who might recognize you." The stable hand delivered the horses without incident, accepting Hunter's payment with a tip of his hat before heading back down to the trading post. Within minutes, the party was mounted and moving again. this time heading northwest toward the distant mountains that matched the landmarks on Jacob Warren's map. As the trading post fell away behind them, Daphne felt a strange mixture of fear and determination settling in her chest. They were committed now to the journey, to the plan, to seeing justice done for their parents. And somehow, despite the danger that lay ahead, having Hunter Hayes riding beside them made the burden feel just a little lighter. The next 2 days passed in a blur of hard riding and brief, vigilant rests. Hunter set a grueling pace, clearly intent on putting as much distance as possible between them and any potential pursuers. The terrain grew increasingly rugged as they pushed deeper into the wilderness, following the landmarks indicated on Jacob's map. By the third day, they had entered a region of towering mesas and deep, winding canyons. The air was thinner here, the sun more intense, beating down on the exposed rock and sending waves of heat shimmering above the landscape. "We're close," Hunter announced as they paused to water the horses at a shallow creek. He was studying the map, comparing it to the dramatic rock formations that surrounded them. These twin butts match the drawing. The canyon entrance should be within a few miles. Daphne dismounted stiffly, her muscles aching from the long hours in the saddle. "Do you think Reed figured out where we're headed?" Hunter's expression was grim. "If he's studied that map as long as I think he has, he'll know. The question is whether he's ahead of us or behind us. Or waiting for us," Deanna added darkly, scanning the cliffs above. "That's why we approach carefully," Hunter said. "No more riding in the open. From here we lead the horses and stay to the shadows." They continued on foot, picking their way through the rocky terrain with increasing caution. The silence of the landscape was broken only by the occasional cry of a hawk circling overhead and the soft crunching of their boots on the gravelly soil. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the canyon walls, they came upon a narrow passage between two towering rock faces. Hunter held up a hand, signaling them to stop. "This is it," he said quietly, pulling out the map and the gold nugget. "According to the legend, we placed the marker here." He positioned the oddly shaped nugget against a specific point on the map, aligning it with the rock formation before them. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as the sun's angle shifted slightly, a beam of light caught the gold nugget, reflecting off its surface and illuminating a previously unnoticed symbol etched into the rock face, a simple arrow pointing into the narrow passage. "Incredible," Daphne breathed, stepping forward to touch the ancient marking. "Your father was right all along," Hunter said, a note of wonder in his voice. "The lost canyon is real. So what now?" Deanna asked, ever practical. "Do we just walk in and collect the gold?" Hunter shook his head. "Now we prepare. Reed and his men could be anywhere. We need to establish a defensive position and be ready when they come." He studied the narrow passage thoughtfully. "This is actually perfect. They can only come at us from one direction." "Or we could just take what we came for and leave," Daisy suggested hopefully. "Before they ever know we were here." "It's not that simple," Daphne said gently. "Even if we found the gold right away, we couldn't carry enough to make a difference. We need justice more than riches." Hunter nodded in agreement. "We make camp here tonight. Tomorrow at first light, we'll enter the canyon and see what your father was willing to die for." They set up a small, concealed camp in a natural alcove near the canyon entrance. Hunter insisted on taking the first watch, positioning himself on a rocky outcrop that afforded a view of their back trail. The sisters huddled together near a tiny, smokeless fire, speaking in hushed tones. "What do you think we'll find in there?" Daisy wondered, her young face illuminated by the soft glow of the embers. "If the legends are true, more gold than we could ever spend," Deanna replied. "And if they're not," Daisy pressed, Daphne's expression was solemn, "then we still have what matters most, each other." Later, as her sisters slept, Daphne climbed up to join Hunter on his rocky perch. The night was clear, a canopy of stars stretching endlessly above them. "You should be resting," Hunter said, though he moved over to make room for her. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted, settling beside him. "Too many thoughts." They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the desert. "What will you do?" Daphne finally asked. After this is over, Hunter seemed surprised by the question. I haven't thought that far ahead. Yes, you have, Daphne challenged gently. You're not the type to ride into something without considering all the angles. A hint of a smile touched Hunter's lips. You're very perceptive. It's a gift, she replied with a small smile of her own. So, Hunter sighed, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. I was thinking of heading north, maybe Montana or Wyoming, somewhere I can start fresh where no one knows my name or what I've done. Alone. The question was quiet, almost hesitant. Hunter glanced at her, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. That was the plan. Daphne looked away, suddenly self-conscious. Plans change. They do at that, Hunter agreed softly. Another silence fell between them, this one charged with unspoken possibilities. Tell me about him, Hunter said eventually. Your father, not the man I knew, but the man you knew. Daphne's expression softened with memories. He was kind, strong, but gentle. He taught us to read and write, to shoot, to ride. He would read to us every night, even when we were old enough to read ourselves. She smiled at the recollection. He had a terrible singing voice, but that never stopped him from filling the house with music. That sounds like Jacob, Hunter said, his own smile tinged with sadness. He never talked much about the war or his time as sheriff, Daphne continued. But sometimes I would catch him staring off into the distance, like he was seeing ghosts. Hunter nodded in understanding. We all have those moments. The war changed everyone who lived through it, including you, Hunter's jaw tightened, especially me. Is that why you became a marshal? Daphne asked. To make sense of it all, maybe, Hunter conceded. Or maybe I just didn't know how to live in a peaceful world anymore. He shook his head, as if dismissing the thought. Your father found his peace, though, in your family. I envied him that. Daphne studied his profile in the moonlight, the strong line of his jaw, the slight furrow between his brows. It's not too late, you know, to find peace. Hunter turned to meet her gaze, and for a moment the walls he kept so carefully constructed seemed to lower. Sometimes I wonder. The intensity of his gaze made Daphne's heart quicken. She was suddenly acutely aware of how close they were sitting, of the warmth of his presence beside her on the cool night air. The moment was broken by a distant sound so faint that at first Daphne thought she had imagined it. But Hunter's body instantly tensed, his hand moving to his rifle. What is it? She whispered. Horses, he replied grimly. At least 3 moving slowly, could be Reed. Daphne listened intently and heard it now, the soft clink of metal, perhaps a bit or a stirrup, carried on the night breeze. Wake your sisters, Hunter instructed, already moving into a defensive position. But quietly, we don't want them to know we've spotted them. Daphne scrambled back down to their small camp, gently shaking Deanna and Daisy awake. They're coming, she whispered urgently. Get ready. The sisters moved with practiced efficiency, gathering their few belongings and checking their weapons. Years of frontier living had taught them to wake fully alert, a skill that served them well now. Hunter rejoined them moments later. They're approaching from the south. 3 riders moving cautiously, has to be Reed and what's left of his gang. What's the plan? Deanna asked, her voice steady despite the danger. Hunter's expression was grim but determined. We have the advantage of position. They don't know exactly where we are, and they'll have to come through that narrow passage to reach the canyon. He pointed to a cluster of large boulders. You 3 position yourselves there. It offers good cover and a clear line of sight to the passage. Where will you be? Daphne asked. Higher up, Hunter replied, gesturing to a ledge overlooking the passage. I can provide covering fire from above. And if things go wrong, Daisy asked, her young face pale but resolute in the moonlight. Hunter's expression softened slightly. Then you run. There's a back way out of this canyon. I spotted it on our approach. It's narrow, but you can make it through on foot. He hesitated, then added, if I don't make it, head north to Durango. Ask for Marshal Callahan. Tell him Hunter Hayes sent you. He'll help you get to your aunt in Colorado. Daphne wanted to protest, to insist they would all make it out together, but the grim reality of their situation stopped the words in her throat. Instead, she nodded, accepting his instructions. Good, Hunter said, checking his Winchester one last time. Now get into position. They'll be here within minutes. The sisters moved silently to the boulder cluster, crouching behind the natural barricade with their weapons ready. Hunter climbed swiftly up to the ledge, becoming almost invisible in the shadows of the overhanging rock. The weight was excruciating. Every small sound a pebble dislodged by the wind, the soft hoot of a distant owl made them tense in anticipation. Daphne found herself holding her breath, her heart pounding so loudly she feared it might give away their position. Finally, the unmistakable sounds of approaching riders reached them: the crunch of hooves on gravel, the creak of saddle leather, the low murmur of men's voices. "Must be around here somewhere," one voice was saying, barely audible. "The map leads right to this spot." "I don't like it, Silas," another voice replied. "It's too quiet, perfect place for an ambush." "Shut up, Morgan," snapped the first voice, presumably Silas Reed. "They're just girls, probably holed up in the canyon, thinking they're safe." "And the man with them?" the second voice persisted. "The one who killed Jackson?" "1 man against 3, Reed scoffed. "I like those odds." From her position, Daphne could just make out the silhouettes of the riders as they approached the narrow passage. The leader, tall and broad-shouldered with a distinctive scar on his face, had to be Reed. Behind him came 2 others, both armed with rifles and scanning the surroundings warily. She glanced up toward Hunter's position, but couldn't see him in the darkness. Their plan hinged on letting Reed and his men enter the passage, where they would be most vulnerable, before revealing their presence. The outlaws dismounted at the entrance to the passage, tethering their horses to a scraggly juniper. Reed took a few steps forward, peering into the darkness. "Come on out, ladies," he called, his voice echoing slightly off the rock walls. "We know you're in there. Make this easy on yourselves and maybe we'll let you live." No response came from the darkness, only the soft whisper of the desert wind. Reed sighed dramatically. "Have it your way, then." He turned to his companions. "Morgan, you circle around, see if there's another way in. Carson, you're with me." The man called Morgan hesitated. "Split up. I'm not paying you to think," Reed snarled. "Just do as I say." Reluctantly, Morgan started to move away from the passage, heading in the direction that would eventually lead him to the back exit Hunter had mentioned. Daphne exchanged an alarmed glance with Deanna. If Morgan discovered the escape route, they would be trapped. Before they could decide how to respond, a single shot rang out from above, the sharp crack of Hunter's rifle splitting the night. Morgan crumpled to the ground with a startled cry, clutching his leg. Chaos erupted instantly. Reed and Carson dove for cover, firing blindly toward Hunter's position. The sisters seized the opportunity, opening fire from their concealed location. Their shots forced the outlaws to retreat further, pinning them down between 2 lines of fire. "It's a trap," Carson shouted, panic evident in his voice as he fired wildly toward the boulders. Reed was more controlled, taking aimed shots at Hunter's position while keeping his body protected behind a large rock. "You're outnumbered, Hayes," he called out. "I know it's you up there." "Am I?" Hunter replied calmly, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. "Seems to me you've lost 1 man already and the other isn't looking too steady." Indeed, Carson's hands were visibly shaking as he reloaded his pistol, his eyes darting frantically between the ledge above and the boulders where the sisters were positioned. "Last chance, Reed," Hunter continued. "Throw down your weapons and surrender." Reed's laugh was cold and humorless. "You know that's not going to happen, Marshal, or should I say ex-Marshal?" He spat the last words with contempt. "How's that conscience of yours still keeping you up at night after what you did to my brother?" Daphne glanced up in surprise at this revelation. There was clearly more history between Hunter and Reed than he had shared with them. "Your brother made his choice when he shot an unarmed man," Hunter replied, his voice hard. "Just like you made yours when you murdered Jacob Warren and his wife." "Business is business," Reed said dismissively. "Warren shouldn't have been so stubborn. All he had to do was hand over the map." A cold fury filled Daphne at the casual way Reed spoke of her parents' murder. Without thinking, she rose slightly from her position, taking careful aim at the outlaw leader. "Daphne, no," Deanna hissed, trying to pull her sister back down, but it was too late. Reed had spotted the movement and swung his gun toward her with practiced speed. His shot would have found its mark if Hunter hadn't fired at that exact moment, forcing Reed to duck back behind his cover. "Stay down," Hunter shouted to Daphne, the urgency in his voice breaking through her anger. The standoff continued, neither side able to gain a clear advantage. The wounded Morgan had dragged himself behind a rock, still conscious but out of the fight. Carson seemed paralyzed with indecision, unwilling to make a move without Reed's command. Reed himself remained calculating, conserving his ammunition and waiting for an opportunity. "You can't stay up there forever, Hayes," he called out. "Sooner or later you'll have to come down." "Maybe," Hunter acknowledged, "but you'll be dead long before that happens." As if to emphasize his point, Hunter fired again, the bullet chipping rock mere inches from Reed's head. The outlaw flinched, but held his position. The stalemate might have continued indefinitely if not for an unexpected development. The wounded Morgan, seemingly forgotten by both sides, had been slowly working his way around the perimeter of the confrontation. Whether driven by pain, fear, or a desperate bid for survival, he suddenly made a break for the horses, intending to escape. The movement instantly drew everyone's attention. Reed cursed, realizing his cohort was abandoning him. "Morgan, you coward." Morgan had almost reached the horses when Reed, in a fit of rage, turned his gun on his fleeing companion and fired. The shot caught Morgan squarely in the back, dropping him instantly. The momentary distraction was all Hunter needed. He fired twice in rapid succession, his first shot catching Carson in the shoulder and spinning him around, the second striking Reed's gun hand. The outlaw leader howled in pain as his weapon went flying. "Now, Daphne," Hunter shouted. The sisters emerged from their cover, weapons trained on the wounded outlaws. Deanna quickly secured Carson, who had dropped his gun and was clutching his bleeding shoulder. Daisy kept her distance but maintained steady aim at the downed man. Daphne approached Reed cautiously, her father's revolver pointed unwaveringly at his chest. The outlaw glared up at her, clutching his mangled hand, his face contorted with pain and hatred. "Jacob Warren's daughter," he spat. "You look like him, same stubborn set to your jaw." "You remember my father then," Daphne said coldly. "Good, I want you to remember his face when I pull this trigger." Hunter had descended from his position and now moved to stand beside her. "Daphne," he said quietly, "don't." She didn't take her eyes off Reed. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't." "Because your father wouldn't want this for you," Hunter replied. "He wouldn't want you to carry the weight of killing a man, even one who deserves it." "He killed my parents," Daphne said, her voice thick with emotion, "in cold blood." "I know," Hunter acknowledged, "and he'll hang for it, I promise you that." Reed's laugh was more of a pained snarl. "You're a fool, Hayes. There's no law out here, no courts, no justice." "There's us," Hunter said simply, "and sometimes that's enough." Daphne's hand trembled slightly, her finger still on the trigger. For a long moment the outcome hung in the balance, then slowly she lowered the gun. "Tie him up," she said, her voice steady once more. "Tightly." As Hunter secured Reed, Deanna approached her sister. "Are you all right?" Daphne nodded, though her eyes remained fixed on the outlaw who had destroyed their family. "I wanted to do it," she admitted softly. "I wanted to kill him." "I know," Deanna said, putting an arm around her shoulders. "So did I. But Hunter was right," Daphne continued. "Papa wouldn't have wanted that for us. He always said violence changes a person and not for the better." "So what now?" Daisy asked, joining her sisters as Hunter finished binding the outlaws. Hunter straightened up, wiping his hands on his pants. "Now we take these two to the nearest sheriff. There's a town called Redemption about 2 days' ride from here. They have a proper jail and a circuit judge who comes through regularly." "And the canyon?" Deanna asked. "The gold," Hunter glanced toward the narrow passage that led into Lost Canyon. "It's waited this long." "It can wait a little longer." But Deanna began to protest. "He's right," Daphne interrupted. "Justice first, that's what Papa would have wanted." Hunter studied her for a moment, something like admiration in his eyes. "We'll come back," he promised, "together." The word hung in the air between them, laden with meaning that went beyond their current circumstances. Together suggested a future, a continuation, a bond that wouldn't end when justice was served. The journey to redemption was arduous but uneventful. Reed and Carson, securely bound and mounted on their own horses, had little choice but to comply. Hunter maintained a vigilant watch, especially over Reed, whose calculating gaze suggested he was constantly searching for an opportunity to escape. Redemption proved to be larger than they expected, a growing town with a main street lined with businesses, a church with a white steeple, and several side streets of modest homes. The sheriff's office was a solid brick building near the center of town, flying both the American flag and the territorial flag. Sheriff Emmett Wilson was a grizzled veteran of the frontier, his weathered face lighting with recognition when Hunter introduced himself. "Hayes," he said, rising from behind his desk to shake Hunter's hand. "Heard you turned in your badge. Good to see you're still bringing in the bad ones." "Some habits are hard to break," Hunter replied with a slight smile. "This is Silas Reed and Tom Carson." Reed is wanted for multiple murders, including Jacob and Margaret Warren of Sweetwater. Carson is his accomplice. Wilson's bushy eyebrows rose. "Reed, the one with the bounty on his head," he whistled low. "That's a tidy sum you've earned yourself." "The bounty goes to the Warrens," Hunter said firmly, gesturing to the sisters who stood just inside the doorway. "They're Jacob's daughters. They lost everything because of Reed." The sheriff studied the young women with newfound respect. "My condolences for your loss, ladies. Your father was known even in these parts as a fair and honest lawman." "Thank you, Sheriff," Daphne replied quietly. Wilson turned his attention back to the prisoners. "Judge Parker is due here in 3 days. Until then, Mr. Reed and his friend will enjoy our hospitality." He called to his deputy to take the men to cells in the back. As Reed was led past the sisters, he paused, his eyes fixing on Daphne with cold hatred. "This isn't over, girl, not by a long shot." Hunter stepped between them, his hand resting meaningfully on his holstered gun. "It's over for you, Reed. The only question is whether you hang here or in a bigger town with a bigger audience." Reed's face twisted with rage, but the deputy shoved him forward before he could respond. Once the prisoners were secured, Wilson offered the group chairs and coffee. "You all look like you could use some rest. There's a decent hotel just down the street, clean beds, hot food." "That sounds like heaven," Deanna admitted, the weariness of their journey evident in her voice. "Before we go," Hunter said, leaning forward in his chair, "I need your word these men will stay locked up until the judge arrives. Reed is dangerous, even wounded." Wilson nodded solemnly. "They won't be going anywhere, Hayes. You have my word on that." Satisfied, Hunter led the sisters to the Redemption Hotel, a 2-story building with a freshly painted facade and lace curtains in the windows. The lobby was modestly appointed but clean, with a polished reception desk and several comfortable-looking chairs. The clerk looked up as they entered, his eyes widening slightly at their trail-worn appearance. "Good afternoon," he greeted them cautiously. "Can I help you? We need rooms," Hunter said, reaching for his wallet. "2 adjoining if possible." "Of course, sir." The clerk opened his register. "And how long will you be staying?" Hunter glanced at Daphne. "At least until the circuit judge finishes his business here." "That would be 4 or 5 days, depending on how many cases he has," the clerk informed them. "Judge Parker is very thorough." 5 days, Hunter confirmed, placing coins on the counter. "And we'll need baths brought up and a hot meal." "Right away, sir." The clerk handed over 2 keys. "Rooms 204 and 205, top of the stairs and to your right." The sisters could barely contain their excitement at the prospect of hot water and clean beds. Even Daphne, usually the most composed of the 3, looked longingly toward the stairs. "Go on up," Hunter told them with a smile. "I'll see about getting our things from the horses and arrange for the baths." "You'll join us for dinner?" Daphne asked, her hand lingering on the stair rail. Something warm flickered in Hunter's eyes. "I'd like that." Later, freshly bathed and dressed in the cleanest clothes they could manage, the sisters gathered in their room to await Hunter's arrival for dinner. The hotel had provided them with a brush and mirror, and they took turns helping each other restore order to their travel-tangled hair. "You like him," Deanna observed as she gently worked the brush through Daphne's long chestnut waves. Daphne met her sister's knowing gaze in the mirror. He's a good man. He's risked everything to help us." "That's not what I meant, and you know it," Deanna replied with a small smile. A soft knock at the door saved Daphne from having to respond. Hunter stood in the hallway, his appearance transformed by a bath and a shave. His dark hair was combed neatly back, and he wore a clean white shirt with his usual dark trousers. Without the layer of trail dust, he looked younger, his hazel eyes more prominent in his tanned face. "Ladies," he greeted them with a slight bow, "you all look refreshed." "As do you," Daphne replied, a faint blush coloring her cheeks as she took in his changed appearance. "The dining room is ready for us," Hunter said, offering her his arm. "Shall we?" The hotel's dining room was small but pleasant, with white tablecloths and fresh flowers on each table. A few other guests dined quietly, occasionally glancing curiously at the newcomers. The food was simple but well-prepared: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. It was the first proper meal they'd had in days, and the sisters ate with hearty appreciation. Even Hunter seemed to relax, the constant vigilance of the trail giving way to a more casual demeanor. As they lingered over coffee and pie, Daphne finally asked the question that had been on her mind since the confrontation with Reed. "What did he mean about his brother? He seemed to know you personally." Hunter's expression clouded slightly. "It's a long story." "We have time," Daphne said gently. Hunter sighed, setting down his coffee cup. "About a year ago, I was tracking a gang that had robbed a bank in Tucson. 3 men, including Reed's younger brother, James. They'd killed a teller during the robbery, shot him in cold blood when he was already cooperating." The sisters listened intently as Hunter continued. "I caught up with them near the Mexican border. There was a shootout. 2 of them died, including James Reed. The 3rd man surrendered." Hunter's jaw tightened. "But Silas Reed spread the word that his brother had been trying to surrender when I shot him, said I murdered him in cold blood. Was there any truth to it?" Deanna asked bluntly. Hunter met her gaze steadily. "No. James Reed was firing at me right up until the moment he died. But in this territory, rumors spread faster than truth. Some people believed Reed's version, started looking at me differently." "Is that why you turned in your badge?" Daphne asked softly. Hunter nodded. "My superiors stood by me, but I could feel the trust eroding. A marshal needs the confidence of the people he's sworn to protect. Without that," he shrugged, "it seemed better to walk away." "That's not fair," Daisy protested. "You were just doing your job." Hunter smiled at her youthful indignation. "Life rarely is fair, little one. Sometimes you just have to make the best of the hand you're dealt." "And what about now?" Daphne asked. "Once Reed faces justice for our parents, what then?" The question hung between them, laden with unspoken possibilities. "I haven't thought that far ahead," Hunter admitted, though his eyes, fixed on Daphne's, suggested otherwise. "Well, I have," Deanna declared, rising from the table. "And right now, I'm thinking about that comfortable bed upstairs." "Come on, Daisy, let's give these 2 some privacy." "Deanna," Daphne protested, her cheeks flushing pink. Deanna merely winked as she led Daisy from the dining room, leaving Daphne and Hunter alone at the table. An awkward silence fell between them, broken only when Hunter cleared his throat. "Your sister is direct. That's one word for it," Daphne agreed with a small laugh. "I'm sorry if she made you uncomfortable." "She didn't," Hunter assured her. "In fact, I've been wanting to talk to you alone." Daphne's heart quickened. "About what?" "About what happens after this is all over," Hunter said, his voice dropping to a more intimate tone. "About the future." "I thought you hadn't planned that far ahead," Daphne reminded him, though her tone was teasing. Hunter smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his usually serious face. "Maybe I've been doing some thinking since we arrived here." "And what have you been thinking?" Daphne asked, her own voice soft. Hunter reached across the table to take her hand in his. The touch was electric, sending a warm current up Daphne's arm and into her chest. "I've been thinking that I don't want to say goodbye to you and your sisters when this is over," he admitted. "Especially not to you." Daphne's breath caught in her throat. "Hunter, let me finish," he said gently. "I know we haven't known each other long, and maybe this is too forward, but—" He paused as if searching for the right words. These past days with you, despite all the danger and hardship, have been the most alive I've felt in years. Daphne's fingers tightened around his. I feel the same way, hope brightened Hunter's eyes. You do. She nodded, suddenly shy despite her boldness. When my parents died, I thought I'd never feel anything but grief and anger again, but then you came into our lives and, she shook her head, smiling softly, you brought something back to me that I thought I'd lost forever. What's that? Hunter asked, his thumb gently stroking the back of her hand. Hope, Daphne replied simply. Hope for a future that could still be good despite everything. Hunter's expression grew serious. I can't promise you an easy life, Daphne. I'm not a wealthy man and I've made enemies in my line of work. I don't want easy, Daphne assured him. I just want real, and you, Hunter Hayes, are the most real man I've ever known. Something in Hunter's face softened, a vulnerability showing through his usual stoic exterior. Your father would probably shoot me for even thinking about courting his daughter, Daphne laughed softly. No, he wouldn't. He'd give you that stern look of his, ask you your intentions, and then pour you a whiskey. He always said he wanted us to find men who would stand beside us, not in front of us. Smart man, Hunter murmured. He was, Daphne agreed, a bittersweet smile touching her lips. And he would have approved of you, I know it. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, their joined hands a bridge between their separate pasts and what might become a shared future. So, Hunter finally said, what happens now? Now, Daphne replied, we see Reed brought to justice. We recover whatever is in Lost Canyon. And then? She looked into his eyes, letting him see the certainty in hers. Then we decide where our path leads next, together. Hunter lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Together, he agreed, the word a promise between them. The next 3 days passed in a strange mixture of tension and tranquility. The sisters enjoyed the respite of the hotel, catching up on much-needed rest and gradually processing all that had happened since fleeing Sweetwater. Hunter divided his time between the sheriff's office, ensuring Reed and Carson remained secure, and the hotel, where increasingly he found himself drawn to Daphne's company. On the evening before Judge Parker's expected arrival, Hunter took Daphne for a walk through the town. The spring air was mild, and redemption was peaceful as dusk settled over the buildings. Sheriff Wilson received a telegram from Sweetwater today, Hunter told her as they strolled past the darkened storefronts. The town marshal there confirmed your parents' murders and Reed's involvement. There will be no shortage of charges against him. Daphne nodded, absorbing the news. Will we need to testify? Possibly, Hunter acknowledged. Though Wilson thinks the evidence is strong enough without putting you girls through that ordeal. They walked in silence for a moment, their shoulders occasionally brushing. I've been thinking about the canyon, Daphne said eventually. About what we might find there. Having second thoughts, Hunter asked. She shook her head. No, but I've been wondering what my father intended us to do with whatever treasure is hidden there. He never spoke of wealth or riches, yet he protected this secret his entire life. Maybe he was saving it for the right moment, Hunter suggested, a legacy for his daughters. Perhaps, Daphne agreed, or maybe he understood something about that canyon that goes beyond gold. Hunter looked at her curiously. What do you mean? Daphne shrugged, struggling to articulate her thoughts. I'm not sure exactly, just a feeling I have. Like there's more to this story than we know. They had reached the edge of town, where the neat row of buildings gave way to open country. The setting sun painted the western sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, casting long shadows across the land. It's beautiful here, Daphne observed, gazing out at the vast landscape. It is, Hunter agreed, though his eyes were on her rather than the sunset. Daphne turned to find him watching her, his expression open and unguarded in a way she had rarely seen. Without thinking, she stepped closer to him, drawn by the warmth in his gaze. Hunter's hand rose to gently touch her cheek, his calloused fingers surprisingly tender against her skin. Daphne, he murmured, her name a question on his lips. She answered by closing the distance between them, her heart racing as their lips met in a soft, hesitant kiss. Hunter's arm slipped around her waist, drawing her closer as the kiss deepened, becoming something more certain, more profound. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Hunter rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that since the night we sat watch together under the stars," he admitted. Daphne smiled, her hand resting lightly on his chest where she could feel the steady beat of his heart. "I wish you had. Your father would definitely shoot me now," Hunter said with a soft laugh. "Worth it," Daphne declared, rising on her toes to kiss him again. They walked back to the hotel hand in hand, the newly acknowledged feelings between them creating a bubble of happiness that seemed to insulate them from the uncertainties that still lay ahead. Judge William Parker arrived in Redemption the following morning with little fanfare, a tall, dignified man in his 60s with sharp eyes, and a reputation for fair but uncompromising justice. He wasted no time in reviewing the cases before him, setting Reed's and Carson's trial for that very afternoon. The courtroom, hastily arranged in the town hall, was packed with curious townspeople eager to witness the proceedings. The Warren sisters sat in the front row, with Hunter beside them. Reed and Carson were brought in under heavy guard, their shackles clanking as they were led to the defendant's table. Reed's eyes immediately sought out Daphne, his gaze filled with malevolent hatred. Hunter placed a protective hand on her arm, silently reassuring her of his presence. Judge Parker called the court to order, his deep voice commanding immediate attention. The charges against Reed and Carson were read: multiple counts of murder, robbery, assault, and kidnapping. When asked how they pled, Carson mumbled "not guilty," while Reed merely glared defiantly at the judge. The trial proceeded with remarkable efficiency. Sheriff Wilson presented the evidence gathered from Sweetwater, including witness testimonies to Reed's threats against Jacob Warren. Hunter testified about the confrontation at the canyon and Reed's own admission to the murders. When it was Daphne's turn to take the stand, she did so with quiet dignity, recounting the night her parents were killed and the subsequent pursuit by Reed and his gang. Her clear, steady voice never faltered, even when Reed's attorney tried to suggest the valuable map was rightfully Reed's property. "The map belonged to my father," Daphne stated firmly. "It was his to give to whomever he chose. He chose his family." The defense offered little in the way of compelling arguments. Reed himself refused to testify, while Carson attempted to claim he was merely following orders and had no knowledge of the Warrens' murders. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the tall windows of the town hall, Judge Parker delivered his verdict. Carson was sentenced to 20 years in the territorial prison for his role in the crimes. Reed, found guilty on all counts, was sentenced to hang. "Justice has been served here today," Parker intoned, his gavel striking with finality. "Silas Reed, you will be remanded to custody until such time as the sentence can be carried out, which I hereby set for 1 week from today." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Reed's face contorted with rage as the guards moved to take him away. "This isn't over," he shouted, struggling against his restraints. His wild eyes found Daphne in the crowd. "You hear me, girl? This isn't over until I say it is." "Remove the prisoner," Parker ordered sharply. As Reed was dragged from the courtroom, still shouting threats, Hunter put his arm around Daphne's shoulders. "It's over," he assured her. "He can't hurt you or your sisters anymore." Daphne leaned into his embrace, the weight of the past weeks finally lifting from her shoulders. "Yes," she agreed softly, "it's over." Later that evening, as they celebrated the verdict with a special dinner at the hotel, Deanna raised her glass in a toast. "To justice," she said, her eyes bright with unshed tears, "and to Mama and Papa. May they rest in peace knowing their killers have been brought to account." "To Mama and Papa," Daphne and Daisy echoed, raising their own glasses. Hunter added his glass to the toast. "And to Jacob Warren, the finest man I ever knew." As they drank, a comfortable silence fell over the table, each lost in their own thoughts and memories. "So," Deanna said eventually, turning to Hunter with a mischievous glint in her eye, "now that justice has been served, what about that canyon full of gold?" Hunter chuckled at her directness. "I was thinking we might head back there tomorrow if you're all up for it." "Absolutely," Deanna confirmed enthusiastically. I'd like to see what Papa protected all these years, Daisy added. Daphne nodded in agreement, though her expression was thoughtful. Yes, I think it's time we discovered the truth about Lost Canyon. They set out at dawn the next morning, well supplied and well rested, their spirits lighter than they had been since leaving Sweetwater. The journey back to the canyon took less time now that they weren't being pursued, and by mid-afternoon of the second day, they found themselves once again at the narrow passage that led into the legendary Lost Canyon. Hunter dismounted first, helping Daphne down from her horse. "Ready?" he asked, his hand lingering on hers. She nodded, excitement and apprehension mingling in her expression. "Let's find out what my father died protecting." They led their horses through the passage, emerging into a breathtaking scene that none of them had been able to fully appreciate during their previous visit. The canyon opened up before them, a hidden valley of surprising beauty. Sheer walls of red rock rose on all sides, but the canyon floor was verdant with grass and scattered trees. A clear stream wound through the center, its waters reflecting the deep blue of the sky above. "It's beautiful," Daisy breathed, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "But where's the gold?" Deanna asked practically, scanning the landscape. Hunter pulled out the map and the gold nugget. "According to this, we need to find a rock formation that matches the shape of the nugget. The map indicates it should be near the west wall." They tethered their horses near the stream and began exploring the canyon, moving methodically along the western edge. The rock walls were dotted with caves and crevices, any of which might conceal the treasure they sought. After nearly an hour of searching, it was Daisy who spotted a rock outcropping that bore an uncanny resemblance to the unusual shape of the gold nugget. "Look," she called excitedly, "over here." They gathered around the formation, which jutted from the canyon wall about 7 feet above the ground. "That has to be it," Hunter confirmed, comparing the rock to the nugget in his hand. "But how does it work?" Daphne studied the map again. "The notes suggest there's some kind of mechanism." "The nugget is supposed to fit into a corresponding depression in the rock." Hunter boosted Daisy up to get a closer look at the formation. The youngest Warren sister ran her hands carefully over the surface of the rock. "There's something here," she announced. "A small hollow that looks exactly like the nugget." Hunter lifted Daphne next, handing her the gold piece. With careful precision, she inserted the nugget into the depression. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a low grinding sound, a section of the canyon wall began to move, revealing a hidden entrance. "Incredible," Deanna whispered as Hunter helped Daphne back down. The opening was large enough for a person to walk through comfortably, leading into darkness beyond. Hunter lit a lantern he had brought and led the way inside, the sisters following closely behind. The passage extended about 20 feet into the rock before opening into a spacious cave. As the lantern light spread through the chamber, they gasped in unison at what it revealed. Gold was there, certainly several small chests of coins and nuggets stacked against one wall. But they were almost an afterthought compared to the cave's main contents. Shelf upon shelf of books, manuscripts, and scrolls, carefully preserved in a dry, protected environment. Scientific instruments, maps, and astronomical charts covered tables in the center of the room. In one corner stood a telescope, positioned near a narrow shaft that appeared to open to the sky above. "What is this place?" Deanna wondered aloud, running her fingers reverently over the spine of a leather-bound volume. Daphne had moved to a desk near the back of the cave, where she found a journal open to a page of familiar handwriting. "It's Papa's," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Listen to this. I have continued Jacob Smith's work as he asked before his death. This repository represents the accumulated knowledge of 3 generations of seekers. The gold is merely a means to an end funding for our true work, the preservation of knowledge that some would see destroyed. The world believes we seek treasure, and that misconception protects our actual purpose. To my daughters, should you find this place, this is your true inheritance. Not gold, but knowledge. Use it wisely." Tears welled in Daphne's eyes as she looked up from the journal. "He was a scholar," she said wonderingly. All those nights he spent writing in his study, he was documenting his findings, adding to this collection. Hunter moved to her side, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Your father was protecting something far more valuable than gold. But who is Jacob Smith? Deanna asked, continuing to examine the impressive library. And why would this knowledge need protecting? Daphne turned the pages of the journal, scanning its contents. According to this, Jacob Smith was a scientist and explorer who discovered this canyon in 1819. He used it to store books and scientific works that were considered controversial or dangerous by the standards of the time, ideas about evolution, geology, astronomy that contradicted religious doctrines. Papa was continuing his work, Daisy realized. Preserving knowledge that might otherwise be lost. And using the legend of gold to protect the canyon's true purpose, Hunter added. Brilliant. They spent hours exploring the cave, discovering manuscripts dating back centuries, scientific instruments of remarkable precision, and maps of distant lands. The gold, while substantial, seemed almost incidental compared to the intellectual treasure surrounding it. As the day waned, they reluctantly prepared to leave, taking only Jacob's journal and a small amount of gold for practical purposes. The rest, they agreed, should remain as their father had intended, a resource to support the continued preservation of knowledge. We'll come back, Daphne promised as Hunter carefully reset the mechanism that concealed the cave entrance. We'll continue Papa's work. We'll need a more permanent base than a hotel room in Redemption, Deanna pointed out practically. Hunter cleared his throat. Actually, I've been giving that some thought. 3 pairs of eyes turned to him curiously. There's a ranch for sale just outside of town, he explained. Nothing fancy, but good land with water rights and a solid house. I looked at it while you were resting at the hotel. A ranch. Deanna repeated, a smile spreading across her face. You mean a home? Hunter nodded, his eyes finding Daphne's. I thought, well, with the gold we're taking, we could buy it, make it a home for all of us. He hesitated, suddenly unsure, if that's something you'd want. Daphne stepped closer to him, her heart so full she could barely speak. Are you asking what I think you're asking, Hunter Hayes? A slight flush colored his tan cheeks. I'm not doing this right. I should wait, do it properly with a ring, and Daphne silenced him with a kiss, throwing her arms around his neck as her sisters watched with delighted smiles. Is that a yes? Hunter asked when they finally parted, his arms still around her waist. Yes, Daphne confirmed, her eyes shining with happiness. Yes to the ranch, yes to a home, yes to everything. Deanna cleared her throat dramatically. Not to interrupt this touching moment, but does this mean I'm going to be sharing a house with you 2 lovebirds? Hunter laughed, keeping one arm around Daphne as he turned to her sisters. The ranch has plenty of room for all of us, and I promised your father I'd look after you all. His expression grew more serious. I intend to keep that promise for the rest of my life, even me. Daisy asked, her young face hopeful. Especially you, little one, Hunter assured her with a warm smile. Someone has to help me keep these 2 in line. He winked at Deanna, who rolled her eyes good-naturedly. As they made their way back through the canyon toward their horses, the setting sun cast a golden glow over the landscape, turning the red rocks to flame. Daphne looked around at this hidden place that had played such an important role in her family's history, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. You know, she said thoughtfully, I think my father always intended for us to find this place, to continue his work. And Reed, Deanna asked. Do you think he knew what was really hidden here? Hunter shook his head. I doubt it. Men like Reed can only think in terms of gold and wealth. The true value of this place would have been lost on him. Which is why Papa protected it so fiercely, Daphne concluded. Not for the gold, but for the knowledge. They mounted their horses and began the journey back toward Redemption, toward their future. As they rode, Daphne found herself thinking not of the treasure they had discovered, but of the treasures that lay ahead, a home, a family, a purpose. And beside her, the man who had fought alone to bring her and her sisters safely through danger, now riding beside her toward a shared destiny. 1 month later, Daphne Warren became Daphne Hayes in a simple ceremony in Redemption's white steepled church. Deanna and Daisy stood beside her, their faces glowing with happiness for their sister. Hunter, looking uncharacteristically nervous in a new suit, couldn't take his eyes off his bride as they spoke their vows before the gathered townspeople who had, in just a few short weeks, welcomed the newcomers into their community. The Warren Hayes Ranch, as they called it, was already taking shape as a comfortable home. The modest house had been expanded with a new wing that would serve as a private library and study a place where the contents of Jacob Warren's journal could be studied and preserved. Hunter had proven himself as adept at ranching as he had been at law enforcement, quickly establishing a small but growing herd of cattle. Life settled into a rhythm that none of them could have imagined in the chaotic days following their parents' deaths. Deanna threw herself into ranch operations with unexpected enthusiasm, discovering a talent for business that surprised everyone except Daphne. Daisy, now 17, divided her time between helping her sisters and continuing her education with books brought from the Canyon Library. And Daphne found in Hunter a partner in every sense of the word, someone who stood beside her rather than in front of her, just as her father had wished. Together, they made regular trips to Lost Canyon, cataloging its contents and occasionally bringing back particularly significant works to their home library. On the evening of their 1-month anniversary, Hunter found Daphne sitting on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of purple and gold. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, settling beside her and taking her hand in his. Daphne smiled, leaning against his shoulder. "I was just thinking about how much has changed in such a short time. 3 months ago we were fleeing for our lives. Now we're home," Hunter finished for her, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Yes," Daphne agreed softly. "Home." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the gentle creaking of the swing the only sound beyond the distant lowing of cattle and the whisper of the evening breeze. "I have something to tell you," Daphne said eventually, a hint of nervous excitement in her voice. Hunter looked down at her curiously. "What is it?" Daphne took his hand and placed it gently over her stomach, her eyes meeting his with a mixture of joy and apprehension. "We're going to have a baby." Hunter's expression transformed from surprise to wonder to pure joy in the span of seconds. "A baby," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "Are you sure?" Daphne nodded, tears of happiness gathering in her eyes. "Dr. Miller confirmed it yesterday. We're going to be parents, Hunter." With a whoop of delight that startled the chickens in the nearby yard, Hunter lifted Daphne from the swing and spun her around, his laughter mingling with hers in the evening air. "Careful," she protested through her giggles. "Precious cargo here." Hunter immediately set her down with exaggerated gentleness, though his arms remained around her waist. "I'm sorry," he said, not looking sorry at all. "It's just a baby, our baby." His hand returned to her still flat stomach, caressing it with reverent tenderness. "Are you happy?" Daphne asked, though his reaction had left little doubt. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," Hunter replied, his voice husky with emotion. "I never thought I'd have this, Daphne. A home, a family, a future worth fighting for. You've given me all of that and more." "We've given it to each other," she corrected gently, raising a hand to cup his cheek. Hunter turned his head to press a kiss to her palm. "Your father would be proud of you, of all of you." "And of you," Daphne added. "You kept your promise to him. You brought us home." "Home," Hunter repeated, glancing around at the ranch they were building together. "I like the sound of that." As darkness settled over the land, they remained on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms, discussing names for their unborn child and planning for the future that stretched bright and promising before them. Behind them, lights spilled from the windows of their home, where Deanna and Daisy were preparing dinner, their voices raised in cheerful conversation. The dangers they had faced, the losses they had endured, all had led them to this moment, this life they were creating together. Not just survival, but thriving. Not just a house, but a home. Not just a family bound by blood, but one bound by choice and love and shared purpose. And as Daphne gazed up at the first stars appearing in the darkening sky, she whispered a silent thank you to her father for the true treasure he had left them, not gold, but the chance for a new beginning. A legacy not of wealth, but of knowledge, courage, and love that would endure for generations to come.